All right. Are we good to go? Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the very first Strategy, Operations and Finance Committee meeting for the year. It's really good to be back for those of us who are here today. We seem to have a number of apologies today. Anyway, I shall just read the council blessing before we start. So as we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership and a spirit of harmony and compassion. So we do have a number of apologies today from councillors Kathy Spears, Rob Coford and Kathy Spires, sorry. What did I say? Kathy Spears. Kathy Spires. Also, Councillor Sophie Hanford has a leave of absence, and we have apologies from Simon Black, of the Otaki Community Board. Cam Butler is attending in his place, and also an apology from Hurawai Paki, who's had a bereavement in his family. So I'd like to move that those apologies be accepted. Could I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Martin. All those in favour? Aye, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda? No?
Yep.
Yes?
Just in relation to the health stuff, as you're aware, I work for one of the largest PHAs in the country. So I'll just for clarity, I will abstain from any voting on the health stuff.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you.
Public speaking time, we have no items of public speaking that I'm aware of, so we'll move right along to members' business. Are there any leaves of absence or matters of an urgent nature that members would like to raise? No? Right, and so we'll move straight into the update. So I hope you've all got your thinking hats on today, because today is a very strategic day. It's all about strategy. So I'd like to hand over to Chris Purvan, who's going to give us updates on various strategies that are underway.
Kia ora, thank you. And exciting to be at our first strategy, operations and finance meeting of the year. And I think great to be starting off talking about strategies. You'll see from your agenda, there's a short write-up on this, but I wanted to give a bit of an update on where are we at with our strategies. So you know that we are pushing forward with 5 operational strategies. Economic development, climate change and resilience, and environment and health. And we have an existing strategy in place at an operating level for housing. So today we're actually talking about our health strategy. So I won't go too far into that other than to say we've been making good progress and had good discussion last year with our social sustainability subcommittee before getting to today's discussion. That the economic development refresh and the direction of travel document that you considered last year has now been finalised for consultation by the chair of the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board and our chief executive. And so we are out and about. We're about to be consulting with the community, which is a really good place to be at. Climate change and resilience strategy and the direction of travel of document that's associated with that. We've actually got a think tank meeting this Friday, and we're going to be working with them on that direction of travel document to get any feedback from them about the things that they think we need to emphasise and talk to the community about as we get out and about. I should let you know that they're really interested in thinking about whether we might introduce some symposiums, and they're going to be coming back to talk to you about that in due course. So that's just to give you a heads up. We have a pool of about 50 interested people who are engaged in that think tank space. So we're starting with that group, which I think that's a tremendous amount of people to have got interest from. So we're utilising that group a lot. And that is with the chair and deputy chair of the climate and environment subcommittee. So it's well lined up. We also have our mana whenua representative, which is Hurawai Paki, and he hopefully is going to be with us tomorrow, but may not be because of his leave of absence for bereavement. So we're checking on that. The environment strategy, the direction of travel is going to the climate and environment subcommittee to get endorsement to go to consultation next. And that will come back to this committee before we go out. So you can see that they're starting to be staged and coming through the pipeline. We are working with our communications team to make sure that this lines up with our vision capacity conversations and that it's really clear how these fit in and when and where people can have their say. I do want to say to you, these are intended and are focused as strategic documents. So we are not including really detailed implementation plans in our strategies. Previously, some of our strategies have been 60 pages. We aren't doing that. We are aiming to have really crisp, focused documents that help other people and even our community see the direction that we're wanting to head in and the change and outcomes that we're wanting to make. So how are we meeting the needs of our community is really the focus, and then who needs to get involved. So council is often one party to that, but often we're just a slither of the wider ecosystem that needs to work in some of these spaces. So you will hear us talk about that more and more through this year, about how we're working with our ecosystems and different members and partners coming to the table to talk to you. So a lot of progress has been made, but there's a lot more to be done. And we are looking forward to engaging with our council advisory group. So we are booking in meetings with our Older Persons Council, the Age Friendly Reference Group, the Youth Council, the Disability Advisory Group, and I know I'm missing one. Sorry, what's that? CWB. So we're covering all elements that we can, and then we'll be engaging with the community. So we'll come back to you with any key feedback, and we'll also be inviting anyone who's got specific feedback or ideas or concerns to come back and talk to you and through our subcommittees. So what I've described is essentially that forward work program that you're going to see coming through from a strategy perspective this year.
Thanks, Chris. Are there any questions? No questions? Nothing online? Not yet. Jocelyn, do you have a question? Yes?
Just wait to unmute. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for that introduction. So this is a whole set of really exciting work programs that we're about to embark on. I'm just wondering if you're able to just talk maybe a little bit about how the implementation plan will actually follow on from these strategies, please, what the plan is for that.
Sure. I'll say the general approach we're taking in the areas that I mentioned, the 5 areas, is to start to shape up our ecosystem coming together. So I'll use health as an example because we will be talking about that today, is we are bringing parts of our health sector together to talk about that directional piece so that we can, underneath that, for that strategy, it may be the locality plan, assuming that continues with the changes that the current government are putting in place. But that would effectively start to be an implementation plan for some elements of the strategy. And we would be looking to see if there were wider things we needed to put in place. Another example being the climate change and resilience strategy. Underneath that, we'll be working with the think tank to start to look at developing a work program of things that help to drive the change that we're trying to achieve through that strategy. So they'll be coming back to you to talk about a work program that they're working with the community and others in a similar way that we are working with KHAG. So in fact, I should have mentioned KHAG with the health strategy, because they're going to be important levers for our engagement with the ecosystem that we're working with. So we're trying to set up it's not a standardised process, but there's a bit of consistency to the way that we're working with the community. As I mentioned, we council, in some of these areas, our role is more about facilitation, coordination, and connection, rather than delivery of a service. But in some cases, we do have something that we deliver. So we're trying to be clear about our role, and also lean into supporting the rest of the community to come together. So what we've experienced to date is, in some areas, no one has been fulfilling that connection role or the facilitation role. And so these strategies has been a really good way to get the community to come together in these spaces. So that's the intention. Implementation plans will fall out. They will come back to this forum so that you, after they've gone through the appropriate subcommittees, so that there's an overview of what's intended to drive that change, acknowledging that some of our partners will deliver the actions.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Any other questions? Okay, in that
No,
case.
I've got one.
Oh, you did. Right.
Through you, Madam Chair. So we've got a lot of these happening and going on. Are we comfortable as an organisation that we have the resources to implement these various strategies and policies in an effective way? And how are we kind of creating a work program that ensures that we don't have any kind of strategies and policies that end up sitting on shelves, so to speak? Because I think it's just important to have an answer to that question, because I think as we enter a really busy year of deciding on directions of travel, ways forward, all under the umbrella of our vision Kapiti work, that we can provide the community with some assurance that we have a structured plan around how we're going to have deliverables and actually achieve outcomes on the back of this strategic work program.
It's a great question, and I think I'm going to break it into two components. We've heard from you previously that we have put strategies in place and then had no money to do anything with them, and so it is that it's on the shelf thing. The way that we're designing these strategies with the liberation of working with the sector is that our role really is to and I'm talking about the health strategy, I'm talking about the environment strategy, the climate change and resilience strategy. Many of those actions will be driven by people who are not council. And so our role is going to be in pushing and advocating and getting people together to being on the agenda for their process and their budget process to get things done, versus us needing to have money to deliver things. So we've built money in the budget for that activity, so that we are going to be making sure we've got a presence to maintaining, supporting and doing those things. And I think, as an example, I will use climate change. This organisation has activities it already has underway. You know that we had set organisational emission reduction targets that have been underway for some time. You have seen previously Ninka and her team come and talk around our waste management and minimisation work and things like that. That's already baked into the budget. That's already happening. Some of the additional things that will come through are likely to come from the think tank, thinking about the district as a whole and things that we might be able to do. Some of it will be working with regional partners and other councils on initiatives. It won't necessarily be us needing to do something, if that makes sense. So we haven't said or committed to doing things unless we understood the levers that we have. So in the material that comes through to you, we have tried to talk about the levers for change, and we are focused on who we need to work with to pull those levers. So we'll be coming back and reporting to you on the collective action that's agreed and how that's going to change the aspirations that we have in this community in these spaces. If I think of the health strategy, I think that's going to be a really useful tool to talk outside of this district at a regional level with our health providers and partners, I'm going to say, who aren't in this district, to convey direction and aspiration before you get into what are we going to deliver and what do we need to do. So I think I've mentioned to you before, I have come from central government. Sometimes you look down at a regional district level and you're looking for that aspiration. That hasn't necessarily been as visible as it could be for this district. And these are what we're establishing so we can put our best foot forward and say, here's the things that are important to us as a community. And getting really that buy-in and support for this is what's important, this is what we want to do. Because sometimes you have many different people going, this is important, this is important, this is important. Everything can't be important. So that's the process we're going through at the moment to have a common goal that we're trying to land, and then what will come underneath that as a plan for so who's going to do what to make that happen. And we will have people come back and talk to you about it. So we're not expecting council to have to pay for everything or do everything, and that's an important facet of these strategies. It's about bringing the community together and making sure that the right people are in the conversation and that everybody actually knows each other. And we've had a few meetings in 2023 where we discovered that people didn't know each other. And they're important for some of the things we need to do. So that's part of what we're doing. And as we get this going, there'll be different parts of our organisation that are coming in to support and help some of these things happening. But really, we are going, I'm calling it the MVP, so minimum viable product. We're not doing gold standard. We're doing how do we get some stuff going step by step, build it up so that we can learn and we can start with basic foundations.
I might ask Democracy Service for a transcript of that answer, actually.
It's all about having a clear vision, isn't it? A clear, agreed vision, and it's not to say you're going to do it all tomorrow, but it points the way forward, and then you find the ways to get the resources to do it. Councillor Wilson.
You partially answered the question, but it was in relation to the future development strategy from a regional forum, and how this think tank is going to link into that. I mean, there are plenty of reports that are available now. We held substantial hearings and had, lots of people came and submitted. It was really valuable. The Hora Whenua was involved, as well as the rest of the region and all of the Wairarapa. So there was a lot of really good work that was done there, and so I hope that they're linking in. Otherwise, there's a danger with these things that would just create another silo somewhere.
I think, fortuitously, I am also linked into the work that's been done regionally around the future development strategy and a number of other things. And we have an internal program to make sure we're connected around the work that's happening. The way in which we're engaging in a regional space is to put forward our view into those processes, and then it comes back. So the work we do now is useful even for regional work, because it means we've done our homework, so to speak, before we engage, versus going in with nothing. And as an example, we are talking about the implementation plan at a regional level for the future development strategy, and also alongside that, regional deals. And one of the comments that I was able to make because of the work we're doing and our engagement with our community is that it's really important that we're not stepping past the ecosystems that we have in place and the aspirations and intentions, because we think there's an opportunity to do something with the new government in place. So, those things need to marry up. We basically can't step past what we already have. So if we didn't have some of those aspirations, effectively there'd be no conversation happening, and that would be disappointing. So I can assure you we're connecting that up.
Cool.
No other questions?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Look, that answer's sort of been in your responses already, but I just want to clarify something. One of the things I've noticed in the past is KCDC has been a bit insular with regards to going out and tracking down other funding. So would it be fair to say that we'll be looking for trying to maximise getting external funds into council by ways of grants, by ways of government funding or anything along that sort of line?
I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to put a caveat to that. I mean, I spent last year was my first year in council, and I can say that we actually get a lot of funding in some parts of our work. So, for example, in our roading space, we get funding through NZTA. We do get grants for waste minimisation and a range of things, actually. The second side to this is, yes, we are going for more. So part of this work is we're wanting to leverage up to be in a position to access more. It might not be grants, though. We might be looking to partner with some of central government to deliver some of the things that need to be done, and not council necessarily, but in the community. And I'll give you another example of that. I've been talking to the Chamber of Commerce about the opportunity in the ecosystem for them to bring money into our community that council can't access. And so how in our ecosystem can we work together to see how do we make the best use of that funding? And they are on board with that. So we're starting to push that forward, which I think is really exciting. I don't think we've been in a position to have that conversation for a bunch of reasons previously, but we are now. And I think that's one of the really exciting benefits of bringing everybody together and thinking about how we are delivering towards a goal together and making it about the community rather than different parts of the system.
Cool, thank you for that. I guess that leads on to the second part of my question, is that I've tended to find that as councillors, you can get very caught up in the, should we say, the putting together of all that stuff and down here in the weeds, so to speak. I'm starting to get a bit of a feeling that we're getting on top of that. Does that mean that we'll be creating, should we say, pathways for advocacy with regards to us as councillors being able to step into those sorts of spaces so that we're pushing out in an advocacy role as well as working within our communities as well?
Yeah, I believe so, and it would be with the support of the ecosystems that we're standing up. So if they're coming to you saying, here's what we see, then you have a really nice platform to say the community as a whole is in this position and we're advocating on behalf of a need here, which if you use the housing and business needs assessment in our housing space as an example of that, previously to having that conversation and connection in our community, we're not being seen as needing support from some of central government, but because we were able to do that in the way we have, we've now got a lot more interest, money and opportunity coming through, including that Otaki has been identified as a priority development area, previously known as a complex development area or opportunity, and is somewhere that central governments agree that they're going to prioritise funding. So that's some of the power of the process we're going through.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Councillor Kirby, Deputy Mayor Kirby.
Lawrence, it's fine. No, actually. Me.
But not Larry.
Can I? Not Larry. No, definitely not Larry here. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just got a question. We've got these 5 strategic priorities or strategies that we're developing. Can you help me with understanding where social and community fits into these?
Social and community, meaning a social and community strategy specifically?
Yes. Well, whether it, just that area of our community, which is really dealing with the people challenges of our district, and what does that look like in terms of supporting people on a, so how do we have a strategy for that? Are we going to develop a strategy? Is that in that thinking, or is that just an assumption that will naturally take place across all of these?
No, that's a great question. The operating strategies that I talked about, the 5 of them, they are focused on core challenges in the community from a topic perspective. So, health is a topic. From a people-oriented focus, and you saw the age-friendly approach, which was our first, and is the beginning of a series of approaches that are going to come to you, which are focused on the people element of how we focused on the things that different parts of our community might need, or some emphasis that we might need. So that you're going to see a series of those coming through. We have already begun to look at the youth approach, and Hada is here, so I'll say that we are going to also be looking at an iwi and titiriti approach. Name of that to be confirmed, but essentially we've got a series of planned approaches underway. Underneath the operational strategies will be some sub-supporting strategies. So you might see underneath that supporting strategies and plans that will be more targeted at bringing together some people to do some things that will cover the topics I think you're interested in. We're trying not to have too many strategies. I think I mentioned to you guys last year, there's a lot that we've got at the moment, and the hierarchy between those and people understanding what the priority is a little hard at the moment. And so we're going to be going through that process with you this year, but we want to make sure we've covered off the important elements. So as we do that, we'll make sure that we've ticked those things off, but I'm confident that we've got it covered through the approach that we're going to be bringing to you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? No? All right, I would just like to move then that the Strategy, Operations and Finance Committee note the contents of this update and progress to date to refresh the Kapiti Coast District's suite of community-focused operating strategies. Do I have a seconder for that? Mayor Janet, thank you. All those in favour? Aye, thank you. Yeah, okay, abstention from Councillor Cooper. Over to you again, Chris, for an update on the work programme for this committee.
Thank you. And this may well be a short and sharp item. I just wanted to put it on the table that in 2023 we went through a process with you to set out the annual work programme for this committee. We are going to be going through a similar process. So I'll be working with my SLT colleagues to populate the quarterly forward programme, and that will line up to the things that you want to deliver against your top 10 priorities for the coming year, as well as some other things that we have underway that are ongoing that need to come to this committee. You'll get a chance to have a look at that, as we did last year, and then we'll look to table it here and land it. So I just wanted to let you know that is underway. I think I'm not saying we've done it once, so we're now getting into a pattern. You can expect that we'll go through a similar process with our subcommittees, and that's likely something that the subcommittees will talk about, how that's going to work as well, so that we've got good alignment between our focus and making sure that we're having the right conversations to deliver on the things you want to achieve through this year.
Any questions? No? In that case, I'll move that the Strategy, Operations and Finance Committee note the approach for developing the committee's 2024 work programme. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Warwick, all those in favour? Aye, thank you. Now, we might need a couple of minutes we've got to set up something for the next agenda item. I'm just going to go with the printout, right, okay. So, thank you, Chris, and I'd now like to call on James Jefferson to talk to us about resource consents.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask my colleague if she wouldn't mind giving me her seat for a couple of minutes, because I've got my two managers who I'm sure you might have some questions or will be able to. Sorry.
What's that, sorry?
We might be able to squeeze another seat in.
Which? Yeah, okay, just a minute. Let's squeeze in the seat.
Yeah, I don't want to lose my right-hand person.
I know. Very unusual. Thanks, Jess. Thank you.
I've got the sinky seat. That's fine.
Okay, James, tell us about resource consents. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Your Worship, councillors, other elected members, welcome and thanks
Hold
for
up.
the opportunity to come and talk with you.
We've got someone online that's
And just really the purpose of today is just to give you a quick update on what's in the pipeline currently, and probably will be of significant interest to you given. Not working. Ah, that's better. Thank you. I can move that away because I can hear myself and it's scary. Just what's in the pipeline, particularly given the conversations you've been having through the LTP and the stuff you're wrestling with in terms of the finances. So I'd like to introduce firstly Eloise Carstens, who's our Resource Consents and Compliance Manager. Most of you will know. And Steve Cody, who's our Building Services Manager. And in my seat, down the back, is Sashin Nair, who's the Team Leader Resource Consents. You may have some questions that they will be better qualified to answer and give you some reassurance. But really, it is around that pipeline of work that's coming through. And I sense that the constrictions of COVID and everything else is starting to release a little bit. There's a significant amount of work in here. There's 3,000 dwellings. The team have arranged them in a kind of stage where they're at in the consenting stage from their just in the door or their fast track. So that document that we've distributed this morning, and of course some GIS maps on the back. I don't want to get into processing the consents here this morning. So when you have questions, if we can keep them up. But I do some quick calculations, and I was interested in Councillor Wilson's calculations the other day. But I conservatively estimate there's 90 million in development contributions in here, and very conservatively 12 million in rates and future rates coming in. And so this is a significant amount of work that's coming through, and at different stages. 90, yeah. In development contributions that would attach to these, and they're ballpark. Don't hold me and ask me to pay the balance, but you know that's based on the numbers. So, really, I'm happy to take any questions, and I will defer what I can't answer to the team. And I'd like your feedback on whether this is useful and how we might present this in the future. And in what format that would work for you. Bear in mind, this was cobbled together at the last minute. The team were rushing around because it was a reasonably light agenda, and we thought it would be a good opportunity to get in front of you. So,
Councillor Warwick.
Have we put in place yet steps to stop the transfer of land rather than the development contributions that developers seem to be able to defer their financial contributions to give us stuff that we don't actually want?
Yeah, a good question. Through the chair, look at that. That is an ongoing wrestle, and I don't know if Sean wants to add anything to it, but it is a constant source of negotiation, and we push back as hard as we can. And often they get escalated to me. The team will do what they can through the processes. They will get escalated to me or Sean or the CE. But I think Sean might have something. We're very cautious in what we take across.
Sorry, I didn't actually push the button, but anyway. So yes, we do not take land that we do not want, need, or have a use for. We spend a lot of time putting a lot of work into working with those developers to make sure that whatever is transferred across to us is needed, useful, and fit for purpose. The area, so there's developer contributions and you have financial contributions. That's where you have that conversation about offsetting land in lieu of dollars for a financial contribution, but it has to be linked to an open space need in terms of a park, or they have to demonstrate pretty robustly that there is either the valuation for it is another process that there's a lot of scrutiny put to, but there is a need for it in terms of the actual council policy. And there's an open place strategy that we've recently developed that has helped us put more focus on that. So possibly years back there may have been an issue, but I feel confident that we do now put a lot of effort into making sure that isn't actually what happens. And as James mentions, we spend a lot of time arguing with developers, because that's exactly one thing that they obviously would try and do is to hand over something that may be not quite as valuable as we think, for a value that helps them offset their financial contributions. So it's a pretty robust process, and does often get escalated to both either myself or to James to make sure that we are making sure that council gets value in terms of whatever's transferred over.
Kia ora. Yeah, just a question from me, and I'm not sure if it sits in this space, so feel free to say it's not in the scope. But I'm just noticing that, like, here there's like about 680 houses just through the fast track in Otaki. I know there's a lot more because there's ones that have not gone through the fast track. So in terms of those development contributions, and I'm thinking of this because we've just talked about the health strategy, and that many households coming into Otaki with the medical centre as tiny as it is, how do we ensure that those development contributions directly impact Otaki, or do they go kapiti wide? Because if that many houses, that's just the fast track, is coming into Otaki, our schools and our doctors are not going to be able to sustain that.
Sean might have a great. And then I might say something. You go first, Sean.
The doctor side of things are separate. It's a license.
So the developer contributions have to be linked to an infrastructure need with regard to council-owned infrastructure. So they only fund growth-related development associated with council infrastructure that is driven as a result of that development. So the Local Government Act sets the structure around how we do that, and they have to be linked to a specific project, and then you have to actually link the element of cost that's associated with that developer contribution to the percentage capacity that is required to meet that growth requirement. So each, right across the district, we have separate developer contributions for Otaki, Paraparaumu, Waikanai, Paikokariki, so they are catchment specific. So again, but they're only council-related infrastructure, and it's only growth-related capacity associated with that infrastructure, and it's very stringent in terms of what you can put in there, and there's a process around appealing it, and we have to demonstrate that if we're charging 30% for a new wastewater pipeline or Mill Road or somewhere in Otaki, that we have to show how we develop that cost, and we have to then link that back to the units of demand that relate to the development. So Chris might want to talk about the wider...
I was just going to add that back to the LTP, pleasingly, you have the development contribution policy in your pack, which sets out how that works. And if you're interested in more detail about development contributions specifically, but around health, because I do hear your point, Kim, this is where the priority development area comes into play. So we will be working with the wider central government pool of people to go, what do we need in this community? And at the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee meeting this week of senior officials, central government was in attendance, and they were commenting on the fact that they are focusing on the priority development areas that have been set out through the Wellington Regional Leadership process as their focus point. So you'll be aware that we obviously secured IAF funding. We have identified as a priority part of our district, and we will be focusing this year and in future years as this comes on board at what we need to build into the community, because there's health, there's education, there's a bunch of things that are impacted that we're wanting to make sure we all have a chance to talk about together, and that central government is supporting us on. So there's that commitment from central government that they are focused on those priority areas. And I say that with the context that we have a new government, and I know at the moment they're all working out where they're focused, but some central government agencies did suggest to us that if we're looking at regional deals, that we continue to think about how we put those things on the table, because they're existing, they've been agreed, and they're all focused on them. So as we are building, because this isn't just an issue for Otaki, I think, as we are seeing that growth, we're going to have to go through the same process. I think Councillor Wilson has been raising concerns in Paraparaumu about those same issues, and so as we're seeing that happening, we are working in the background to try and make sure that the right conversations with central government are happening, because local government doesn't build some of those things, central government does, or they facilitate them.
And just as a follow-up question, that was my next one, is about the infrastructure funding that we got around Otaki, and what impact will that play on development fees in terms of these larger developments, if any?
So those, so the majority of that funding from the IF is going to offset council's investment in that infrastructure. Developers are still going to be required to provide developer contributions on the basis of the share of those assets that relate back to their use of those assets. So both stormwater, wastewater and transport, there's still, and Otaki, I can't remember the numbers, but it's certainly going up this year. I know Paraparumu might be 15,000 plus financial contributions. You're looking about $30,000 per lot, that sort of number. And happy to provide it to you, and it would probably be in the actual policy document in terms of what those charges look like for next year.
Cool, thanks. That's all.
Thank you. Mayor Holbrook.
Yeah, I have a different question, but I just wanted to follow up on that for a minute. So I'm hearing that there's conversations going on through the future development strategy, and I'm hearing that we have some plans in the future to have a regional deal potentially. But do you think there's an opportunity, or I mean, would it be possible just to crunch some numbers on an ongoing basis, because we're seeing a whole lot of growth in here that isn't in our priority areas. It just happens where there's empty land and people apply for resource consents and they decide to develop. We don't control that. What about a system where as we get a resource consent, that goes into a database, there's maps that get created where the development is identified, and that information gets fed through to central government departments so that they can ensure that they are providing the social infrastructure to support that development. I mean, don't we need to kind of modernise this and build a bit of structure around it? What are your thoughts around that, Chris?
I think you're on the money, and I think that's what we're trying to do with the future development strategy and the implementation of it. So I had the pleasure this week of seeing an online tool that's being developed, which is starting to put information at a regional level available to everybody, including resource consents. And central government is trying to look at how it focuses its energy with a more collective picture. So I think from an infrastructure perspective, we're really lucky because we've got really great skills and expertise in terms of our waters and our roading here that's delivering things. For those wider community support infrastructure, such as schools and health centres and things like that, it's a bit more arm's length from what we do, but we're competing regionally and we're competing nationally for attention. And so the power of being able to put our information out there and have that planning happening is underway. And we are having the right conversations. So we have central government in our district, which is step one. And this year, as we get into our master planning, and we are going to start looking at the different areas of our district and what's happening in the timing of things, I think we'll be able to build up the picture of the timing of some of these things. So we, for example, in Otaki, are working with MHUD, Kaingaora, TPK, our iwi partners, and we're starting to bring in health and education and others to go, actually, when is stuff coming online? When is the timing for this sort of stuff? So it's slow, but it started. And I think Otaki effectively might be a bit of a template for how we can do this across the whole district. So I'm going to say, hand on heart, we haven't had a chance to get in front of this previously. I actually do think the future development strategy's been useful and bringing that attention and focus. But we need to make sure we have the conversations down here. And this year we're going to be looking at bringing that conversation back to you guys so you can see what's happening. So we've been in the getting some foundation engagement set up, and then we're going to bring it back to you so you can see what's happening. So I think maybe it is that we haven't previously talked about it, but it is happening.
Oh, okay. James just wants to add to that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just picking up on the Mayor's question. We do retrospective annual reporting to MFE and MB. It is always retrospective. I think what you've suggested would be the ideal. It's about how agile then the whole system can be with real-time data, and that would be our challenge to our central government colleagues. But I do think, as Chris said, the future development strategy, our district growth strategy, has earmarked those areas that should be developed. And when we get these out of sequence, if you like, resource consents, there is a lot of arm wrestling with the developer around provision of appropriate infrastructure. That only addresses part of it, and going back to Kim's point around having that wider social infrastructure. But we wrestle with what we can, that is that those that are out of sequence. But the challenge I would put down would be the central government in terms of how they use such a tool, and we're much more agile in the response. I mean, just think of plan changes, the time they take to get through, 10 years to develop a district plan, and then you go into that cycle of updating it and being responsive. So we pull the levers that we can for that out of sequence stuff. Hopefully that is.
Thanks for those answers. Certainly a challenging area, and it's something that keeps being raised. Can I ask one other question through you,
Sure.
Madam Chair? So in these update reports, we don't have a communication engagement section. I know that as these, that I can see, I know that as we receive these resource consents, there's strong public interest. They see the land starting to be prepared. They wonder what's happening. I'm interested in, when we talk about things publicly, what's our responsibility in terms of communicating what's happening? How can we ensure that our community is informed about these as they go forward?
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, I'll have a first crack, and if Eloise thinks I haven't dealt with it. So elected members get the EMB, so we give you on a weekly or fortnightly basis those. That same information is published to the website, but it's a really insightful question in terms of, I've had an official information request this week for a big consent that's just come in. I won't name it, but the framework we have to put around that is, and it's from an elected member, and happy to provide that to you. You have to be careful what you do with that. This is not an informal notification process, and manage the expectation around getting ahead of the planner's report that says this will be limited notified or fully notified or non-notified, and it's a real minefield, as we saw, particularly in 240 Kapiti Road, and we'll bring that debrief back to you next month. So but I think there possibly is more work we can do in easy access for the public to these things. Of course, the developer has to put a site notice on any site, but you can walk past some of them and not even know they're there. So that is something we can wrestle. I don't know, Eloise, if you've got any.
Yeah, from a resource consent point of view, yes, the information is available on the website, so people can ask us to get an application. And we would be able to give them whatever that people have applied for. But in terms of that, there's always a risk, because the resource consent process really has to go through the further information stage and then the condition stage. So what is put in front of them at the application stage may actually look completely different by the time that that the resource consent is granted. So that's why the notification process is such an important step.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to go online now to Councillor Pravanov. Is she there?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Right.
So thank you, James, very much, and team for this report. Obviously, I'm not there to receive the hard copies, so I like to see those either in my pigeonhole or when we next meet, James. I had got a couple of lines of thought. So, particularly with these large subdivisions, how does this tie in with our CWB network that sort of has an overarching plan and making leverage, basically opening up some of these areas which have been closed until now to join up some of these connections that, you know, have, I suppose, a part of our key strategy for the CWB?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Through the chair, obviously, when the application comes in, we've had a pre-application meeting, hopefully with all of the right internal parties there, so roading, stormwater, parks, so they will be flagging whether there's an opportunity for a development to connect and enhance that CWB, absolutely, and I can assure you that they're passionate about making sure their voice is heard through that process, and that that strategy and that network is reflected in future development. And yeah, and that just works its way through the process, and often the developers are really happy to oblige because it's a marketing opportunity for them as well.
So how much leverage do council staff have for developers that may not be quite so keen on this type of activity in their subdivision?
Look, it will always be in terms of what we can ask or what we can require under the district plan or under the RMA. But we have found that a consultative process and discussions go quite a long way. So that's where it's really important to make sure that you've got a good relationship with the developers as well. Obviously, there's the minimum requirements under the district plan and the RMA, but with good negotiation, they are in most cases they are willing to go to a little bit higher mark. So we have been really trying to push for those type of developments.
Thank you for that. So my other line of thought is, I suppose, and this ties in with some of the other comments made by my fellow councillors and elected members. So, these subdivisions, these applications are probably ones that we can't control the timing of them or the location of them to some degree. And then on top of that, we've also got the intensification options that are available now. And I suppose often they don't have to go through this resource consenting process. But how is council staff able to keep any tabs on that? Because what I'm sort of leading to is the impacts on our infrastructure in terms of capacity. So I see that 5 of these consents are in Waikanae, and that's 526 dwellings or subdivisions, plus there's Manu Park. And I know that there's already, it's my understanding there are some limits on capacity coming out of Waikanae. You might get the money, but how do you actually build the pipes in a timely manner so that things don't fall apart? I know there's lots of stuff in there. I know it's complex, I know that.
Yeah, Councillor, sort of, I suppose from a building consent perspective, sort of especially reflecting on those projects where they either come through the fast track process, or where because of the densification rules, you can build as of right. The first time we will see it is at the building consent stage, And
Yes.
obviously we do monitor the work that's coming through for us, and we can, I suppose, develop a bit of a model of what's sort of coming in the door. But you know, it's whereas it can take sort of many months to get a resource consent, you know, we normally process our building consents in sort of quite quick time because it's different sort of things to consider. So therefore, I suspect the council won't have a lot of lead-in time in some cases. It doesn't necessarily sort of give you the answer you want, but that's the nature of some of the projects.
Yeah. So if I can ask then, you know, I certainly understand how you see this intensification, the effects of intensification through the building consent process. You know, has there been an increase, or has there been a number of building consents for that? And you know, does that actually add a lot more to the numbers of dwellings other than what's been provided today?
Through the chair. Thanks, Councillor. No, we're not seeing a lot of MDRS coming through at the moment, and I suspect the market is dictating some of that. But look, to go back to your earlier question, just to build on what Steve said, in terms of the infrastructure where we do get these medium density that haven't gone through a consenting process, the building team are always in contact with Sean's team in terms of those areas that we know might be constrained. And of course, before they get final CCC, they have to get all the connections. So there are checks and balances through there that we can pick up if there are system constraints in the network. But hopefully, if we've done our infrastructure strategy appropriately and the asset management plans that sit under that, we will have a good idea and understanding of where those constraints are. And the team will pick that up when the building consents actually come in the door.
Well, I suppose it's about how, you know, when you actually see these constraints, and I hear that there are some, you know, because you just can't go and put in, you know, 3-4 Ks worth of larger pipes. Well, you can, but it's obviously a long-term process. It's not just like you can connect them, and hopefully that nothing's gonna.
I think Sean Mellon wants to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Or
let Sean go first.
Sorry, Councillor, what restraints are you talking about? Are you got a specific quick issue, or are you actually looking in general?
Oh no, well I'm aware there's some subdivisions in Narara Road, for example, and they're saying that there's issues with developing those because of infrastructure.
Right.
This is water infrastructure.
Water?
Well, stormwater, wastewater. Wastewater more, I think.
So generally, we will have a future plan for those areas that includes an allocation of growth across the ward, and certainly Waikanae specific. We've got plans in the water strategy there for a new reservoir, a new bulk main running to the north along the Old State Highway. So we do consider both areas where there is programmed growth in terms of those asset management plans for those areas. And again, you're generally talking about you're not going to see 500 houses turn up in 12 months. So
no, I know that. I know. Yeah. 3 to 5 to 10 years are the sort of triggers you might be looking at in terms of needing to invest in further capacity. We do have an issue that we've talked about previously around the rising main connection back from Waikanae to Paparumu, but we're working through that at the moment. And again, it's not at a point where, in terms of restraint, that we don't believe the time there to implement that work is going to create a problem. So there may be site-specific stuff I'm not aware of, and generally a development can't go ahead if there is no bulk main to provide water to that development. And if the developer wants to go ahead then at a pace that's quicker than council are providing for in terms of growth, then they'll need to fully fund
that connection. So it's a combination of, if we've got works planned, there's likely to be a timing issue with it, and sometimes developers will want to see that brought forward. If we don't have it planned, there's been a couple in Waikanae where the developers actually funded that infrastructure themselves. So there was a new reservoir put up around the back of, I can't remember the name of the development now, sort of east of the rail tracks, up around the back of Seddon Street. So they funded a reservoir there for that development that provided benefit to us as well. So.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Sean. And I suppose I won't talk for too much long, but obviously with all these resource consents and intensification, I'm very mindful that we have more houses, but I just want to ensure that we have the infrastructure there to actually support them.
Councillor Pravanov, I think that's a really important point. I just don't think we want to delve too much into the
yes, no, I'm just
side of
making
things
that
right now. So,
yeah. Thank you.
Right,
Yeah, thank you.
Moving on to Councillor Halliday, thank you.
Yeah, apologies, Madam Chair. I'm just going to touch on infrastructure, but I'll be brief. Look, in general, I just want to flag this more than anything else. It would be really, really handy for us as councillors to have a bit more of an understanding on how fit for purpose the infrastructure is. There's a lot of growth happening in the area. We're getting a lot of questions with regards to, are we maxed out for capacity? Are we maxed out for capacity? I'm very aware that there's forward planning. Problem is, we're not necessarily aware of it, or we're not necessarily aware of what capacity is currently available. We're getting 1,000 houses potentially plonked on the middle of Parapara Umu and a whole heap of big buildings and everything like that. It's been alluded to that we've got capacity for that. Don't actually know that as such, and that just means that we can then speak with confidence to the community in that space and help pretty much will back up any conversation that's being had of the reasons why not to move forward with this stuff, why this stuff shouldn't be turning up here. So just wanted to flag that if that's possible. I know we have these infrastructure plans, but we've never really gone through those or touched on those. I don't know how we do that, but it'll just be something I'd like to flag at the moment. On the website, I note that we have...
Hang on, Chris would just like to respond to that.
Well, there is the infrastructure strategy, and I think as part of our LTP, we are stepping through that, and the really the next 10, but 30 years of focus. And I think the other thing that's probably useful and relevant is the growth strategy, and the work that we have been doing in things like the future development strategy to look at where do we think growth is happening, and to as best we can say this is where we're expecting it, and so our plans and our strategies do line up. So when we're doing our best to estimate where we think, and I think the words we've used as constraints or pressure points or focus areas will be, but the reality is on a day-to-day basis we deal with what comes in the door in terms of that process. Do you want to say something, Sean?
Just a good point of reference. The work that Hamish presented just before Christmas, I think there was an update in terms of the work that he feeds into in terms of our growth-related numbers in terms of households. But he also did quite an extensive update in terms of the infrastructure. There's a couple of sections in his report that came here that certainly I fed into that talk about where are we restrained. There were some maps in there as well in terms of infrastructure, so that's quite a useful base document. And maybe if you want something more specific in the future, happy to.
So that's the housing and business needs assessment that comes out quarterly, and the area that you'd want to look in there is about realisable development, and that links into what Sean's just mentioned. So if it's useful for me to get our most recent quarterly report just popped onto LG Hub. We do send it around to you, but I'll make sure we can put it to the top of the list for those who are interested in having a look at that. And if you want to talk about it, let us know, because we're happy to work through that detail if you're trying to see how do these things line up and match together. We're happy to do that with you.
Look, it might be considered getting down in the weeds, and I do appreciate what you're saying. But talking about what's coming up, I'm talking about more about where we're at right now. With current networks, we're at like 50% capacity, we're at 80% capacity, are we at 90% capacity? Are we maxed out in certain areas or something along that sort of line? And I appreciate we've got work going on and constantly got working on with regards to growth. It's just getting an idea of where we're at the moment, because everyone speaks, unfortunately, when the stuff turns up, 1,000 houses over here, the general community looks at immediacy. Oh, this is happening now. yes, I appreciate it's not happening over 10 or 15, it's going to happen over 10 or 15 years, but it's just being able to answer those simple questions in the first instance, going, look, there's good capacity for where we're at right now, and this capacity is coming up. So it's just getting a little bit of an awareness of that. It's not, I don't want to go too deep into a deep dive with it.
I think we can perhaps come back to you offline and just highlight to you the information that is available that might help answer those questions. And then if you don't think that covers what you're interested in, you can let us know. But we think that we have information that's coming out regularly that helps with that.
Okay.
It might just not be obvious, so we can help clarify that.
I appreciate that. Next I want to touch on is a bit something that Kim touched on. That's our schools and all that sort of scenario. Now, I appreciate that the government, it's the government's job to supply that support. We've got involved in housing, we've got involved in health because of lack of delivery. My concern is that, we know that the stuff is needed for Kapiti, but actually, is it on the way? Is it being looked at? Is the government actually going to address the fact that we've got all this growth going on here, and we don't need schools in 10 or 15 years' time? We actually need them sort of now, and that sort of stuff. And I don't see where we give oversight to do it. I know it's not particularly our job, but then again, as part of the, structure plan from a social perspective, that is a very important issue.
Maybe it would be useful for us to book an education to come and chat to this, our forum at some point. We are working with them and they are looking at our district and they're building in from their process how they look to support and build presence in the community. So I know we've had conversations about, hey, it feels like we don't have enough capacity here, that they are doing capacity assessments with our forecast growth and where they see the need. I will make the comment though, and particularly from a health space, there's a business element to health, which we are also working on from an economic development perspective of is Kapiti a good place to do business for health providers, and how do we make it a good place for people to want to be? I think many of you know you can't get into a GP, can't get into a dentist, sometimes you can't get into a physio. So it's that this is a national challenge. And we are proposing that is going to be one of the things that falls out of our health strategy as a focus area of getting on top of that workforce space and how we might position Kapiti together. There's also the regional conversation we've begun in that space. So it's not all central government. Some of it is in our advocacy role and our coordination and facilitation that we can do. Schools is not one of those areas unless it's going to be a private charter school. If it's a public school, it's definitely the ministry we'd be talking to. So the conversation's underway. I think what I hear from you is it'd be good to bring that to the table to have a chat about it, which we can do.
More than anything else, just to make sure it's coming in that direction. This is a little bit of a housekeeping one. On the website, we have the listing of the current records. I'm sorry, a bit of naivety here. There's some terms here. One says on hold ends, another one accepted, and another one acknowledged. Just wonder if you tell us what that means.
Okay, so in the RMA, the legislation changed about 2 years ago in terms of when we can start our statutory clocks. So if it's on hold ends, it means that the clock can start moving again. So that would have been either the fee was paid or...
Yep, gotcha.
Yep. What was the other one that you asked?
Accepted.
Accepted means that, yes, we've accepted it under Section 88, so they've done the assessment that we've got sufficient information to proceed with the consent.
Okay, and acknowledged.
Acknowledged as we've received it, but we haven't accepted it yet.
Lovely.
So
Thank you.
that's
That's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yep, I'd hope to keep this linear, but it's probably going to be a little bit all over the place. Just in terms of capacity, so Kapiti Road is at about 120% capacity now. It's full, right? If it was a shop, you'd shut the door, no more customers. Elizabeth Street is at capacity now. It's a choke area. So much so that the NZTA said we can't have a two-way thing on the Waikanai Bridge because it would block up completely a whole of Elizabeth Street. So my point about those things is that to what Martin was saying, we've got areas of Kapiti now that are at capacity, and yet we have significant developments going on that will only add to that. So the roads won't get any bigger, they won't get any wider, we won't add more lanes, but what we will do is add a lot more traffic to already choked roads. When the developers, in terms of the developer contribution, and it's good that we'll have a look through the LTP, I know it's about, under the Act, it's about development contribution for growth, but we do need to have an awareness of when you come and build a new house in Kapiti, you have access to a library, to a pool, to parks, to halls, to all of the things that previous ratepayers have paid for. And the other thing to bear in mind is the pressure that you put on existing users. I used to live in Mount Maunganui, and it was lovely. You went down to the local shop and it was very cruisy, and at Christmas time it was a bloody circus and you found yourself in a big queue. So that's one of the issues that happens with capacity. In Otaki, for instance, where there's a big development at the airport, at the racecourse, terrific. What pressure is that going to put on local amenities now without the provision of any more amenities?
I'm just going to make a comment, adding on to what Sean has already said about development contributions. There's quite defined legislation around what you can and can't cover under development contributions, including the vicinity and distance from where a development is. And I will say that is in the development contribution policy material you have on LG Hub. So if you're interested, have a look at that detail. I won't get into the detail now, but essentially we are doing all that we can to make sure we recover the appropriate contribution through new developments. This year we went back to basics and had a really good thorough look at our DC policy. We always renew it every LTP, but we really shook it down. I even got some legal advice on, can we push the boundaries a bit about climate, and got a bit of pushback and some advice on what else we could do. But my point is, we are doing the thinking and the work in the background to make sure that we are covering those things off, and the teams who are going through the process of resource consents or any of the work we're doing, be it delivery of infrastructure, we are looking at those things. So the things that we're putting on the table for you are attempting to spell that out. And so if it is that we need to lean into some of those documents and unpack some areas, I think we'd be happy to do so. But I think for this conversation today, we are focused on it, and we are trying to make sure that we recover those things. And that has been something that SLT's had some really robust conversations around through this LTP.
And Madam Chair, if I might add to that, look, absolutely, Councillor, you're right. These are big, hairy, audacious challenges. I've asked in a number of councils how much growth is good growth, and that's why your growth strategy is really helpful. But this is the stuff, so you said about going all over the place and not linear. This is exactly the stuff that both consenting teams and the support that we get from the infrastructure people and parks, and this is the stuff we wrestle with on a daily basis, and trying to manage that well, all within 20 working days, is bloody hard. Yeah.
And that actually leads to another point about what we charge for resource consents. We don't charge anywhere near enough for resource consents. We're putting a huge amount of pressure on staff to, as you say, the pressure to deliver in that time period, and for whose gain, right? So the gain is for the developer. The developer stands to gain the most by having it done quickly. We stand to have people getting stressed out and all of those sorts of things. So I would be charging significantly more than we currently do, and I think you can make a valid argument for it, and I'm happy to make that publicly. I guess to some extent, in terms of the growth strategy, it's about what kind of community do we want to have. So if we want to have a giant retirement village, which we kind of almost are, but if we want to have a giant retirement village, that doesn't put so much pressure on schools, but it puts a whole lot more pressure on the health services. for instance.
If I might just respond to that, I think one of the tools that we have in our district plan is around zoning of different areas in our district, and we are going to be talking this year with you about that topic. James's comment earlier about the fact that we put a district plan in and then we're iterating it, we really just want to test that the settings in our district plan as it is right now are setting us up to be supporting the right things in the right place. And you're talking about retirement villages. I'll one up that and say, you know, we've had some discussions about some of our industrial zones, businesses wanting to do retail activity which doesn't meet the requirements for the zoning. So we think there's an opportunity to just check it all to make sure it's giving the district what we want. So the lever or tool you have around that is your zoning. So we're going to be coming back and talking to you about that.
It's a lovely piece of irony in there with a lot of the retail spaces are emptying out because retail is struggling and will continue to, I guess, with the online market. Just a couple more quick points. One was about infill housing. Infill housing, again, comes back to Kapiti Road wasn't designed to have the kind of weight of traffic it's already got, and it's going to get a whole lot more. With infill housing, our streets are built for the number of houses on those streets, and so with infill housing, you can in some cases double the number. You can go up 6 stories. But you've still got the same piece of road, you've still got the same connections, you've still got the same public transport network, etc., etc. So those are things that we need to factor in as well. Just the last bit is on the consents themselves in terms of criteria for notification. So I was somewhat aghast, as I frequently am, that there is a 1,000-unit development on Kapiti Road that there isn't absolutely clear that would be a fully notified consent. I'm staggered that that isn't everybody would go, of course it's going to be a fully notified consent. The impact that's going to have on the whole of Parapara-Umu, on the pool, on the library, on the halls, on all of that infrastructure. Of course something like that would have to be fully notified, but I'm assuming that. And the other one, just as a note, the Vale development in Waikanae were selling. There were 29 apartments for sale, and they were selling them. They actually had a deposit on 6 of them, and they hadn't even applied for a resource consent. So, and again, we should be mortified by that because it's that's got a whole fair go sort of feel about it. So what is our mechanism for protecting the consumer in that regard?
Yeah, look, through the chair, I unreservedly agree, and it puts phenomenal pressure on these guys when a developer is saying, I've already sold these, I need certificate of title, all of that stuff, so that I can draw down my funds. There are no mechanisms that I'm aware of, and I'm happy to look at my staff to be corrected, but it really puts it puts us in a real challenging position, and we've got a couple of local examples of that. One that you mentioned, and some more recently where we were running around 2 Christmas Eves ago, getting stuff signed off and taking bonds just to be able to get them across the line because they had sunset clauses of Christmas Eve, and it is a real challenge.
Can I just finally say, because I don't want people to run away with the idea that I'm an anti-developer. I'm not. I'm pro-responsible development, and I bridle at the idea that we have development that punishes people who are already here. So that's my cautionary tale.
Just before we go on, can I just this turned into a little bit of can of worms, I should say. I think the purpose of this paper was to provide an update on resource consents, and we're kind of drifting into a whole lot of growth strategy, infrastructure strategy, and all sorts of other sort of cans of worms, which are probably best left for discussions around those areas. So can we just sort of keep this focused on that it is just an update on resource consents and deal with those big hairy issues in another forum? Otherwise we might be here for considerable length of time. I think Darren would just like to say some words at this point.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Coe. Just to reiterate your words,
Yeah.
we tend to have a thinking or thought process where we dive into the detail and we look for solutions. This is an update to provide you with what's in front of us, not now, but in the years coming. We've got a financial and an infrastructure strategy, which is not new because we talk about it every 3 years, which gives us a 10-year model, but pushes out to 30 or 50 years. So to have questions about pipes in the ground, we need to lift what it is that we do here. We're a governance table, you know, and so I ask you to challenge us at a governance level. Trust in us that we know how to put pipes in the ground, we know how to filter water, and we know how to clean the stuff that flushes down those pipes. That's what I would ask. Just back to Nigel's comments about 77 to 109 Kapiti Road. I note that in the report it says up to 1,000 dwellings and not 1,000. It's up to so just clarification there. And also the point, if I think about 240 Kapiti Road and the noise that we got over that, and it went to judicial review, and the judge was really, really clear in the process that was followed and our decision. And so that gives me good standing when we sit here and talk about our processes, which not everyone agrees with. I fully understand and respect that. But at times in the regulatory space, you'll get people who don't like the decisions that we make. So it's really important that whilst we have robust debate around the table, sometimes we can't preempt or predetermine decisions or outcomes, because that's the sort of stuff that might land us in the High Court and might see a ruling go against us that will cost this council money, as that challenge cost this council a considerable amount of money, and yet we were clearly justified with that decision in a court of law. So I'm happy to have that debate, but would encourage you to challenge us at that governance level, because that's really what we need to see. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Who have we got next? Community Board Member Butler, very patiently waiting there.
Ngā mihi, Madam Chair. It has been a very long-winded but very interesting kōrero, and it's something I'm quite interested in as well. But given your wise words, I will drop my first anecdote, and I'll talk to Martin, Councillor Halliday, later. So I've actually just got a little bit of a quick question for you, James. So we get to set the development contributions for resource consents and subdivisions, etc. But given that Otaki has these two fast-track applications in process, how do we set the development contributions for those? So the Moy Estates and the Māori Racing Club, does KCDC get to set those, or is it set by the actual, is it EPA board that decides on these?
Yeah, look, again, happy to be corrected, but actually they apply our development contributions policy, even though they run a separate consenting process and conditions and stuff like that, but just they apply what the current rules are locally.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby.
Just thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. This list is not comprehensive, is that right? So there will be some missing off here?
Some smaller ones. Some smaller. These are just the major, and I don't know how we've defined major, but it's more, multiple lots.
Okay, so hence why Otahanga Road development Mansell property is not listed on here. I would consider that a major. So it's got a resource consent, I know, for the lower development, but I know they may not have submitted for the bigger one yet. The other one, and this is just completely probably because of my ignorance, we've got 4 Kapiti Road here, which is the last one on the list. It says 224 applied for, currently processing, 78 lot subdivision. That's the one that's almost built, and yet we're still processing resource consent?
Yeah, maybe.
Go ahead.
Can you help me with understanding that?
Yep, absolutely. So you'll see that that one is the 2 to 4 stage. So that's final sign off in terms of what's going into the ground, making sure that it is according to our standards.
Okay, so that 224 is an actual
It's a stage.
process
Yes,
in
yes.
the resource
So-
consenting. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so the resource consent, it means that the resource consent had been granted, but now we need to make sure that it is according to our standards.
So that they've fulfilled all they need to under the granted resource consent. That's what that is. Okay, thank you. That's helpful for me. Thank you.
Councillor Halliday, you've already had a go. Yep. Councillor Warwick.
Sorry. Sorry, we're back to me.
This is your second time round, so can we have a quick? Oh, it's gone to Shelley.
Something. The MDRS.
Ping pong.
The MDRS was out of our control in a large part. I know that it's put us in some very awkward situations. With regards to Paraparaumu Beach, Kāinga Ora came in, they did a proposal and it got expanded. One of the questions I asked was, have you done a traffic management plan? And said, no, we haven't. Oh, okay, so we're okaying all this with no traffic management plans. I'm just curious, what other tools have we got with regards to, when someone puts in a, just say for argument's sake, someone puts in a application down at Paraparaumu Beach for a large development, and I'm not referring to the hotel in any sort of way, that's already in process, fine, there's no issue there. Would the question of, say, traffic congestion, all that sort of stuff, would that be something that would trigger, should we say, a fully notified process and that sort of stuff, and that could end up limiting development down there? Is that one of the tools that we've got with regards to, should we say, managing those sorts of issues?
Yep, absolutely, you're right. So as part of the 104 assessment, we will determine whether it is a significant effect. So it could be a trigger for a notified consent, yep.
Lovely, that's right, I was just curious about that.
Councillor Warwick.
I've only got a quick one. So the projected income from development contributions is around 90 million. Do we have a projected cost of the infrastructure that, like if we are gaining 90 million, are we spending 30 million or are we spending 120 million?
I'm not sure the staff will have the...
No, but maybe we could have that in the future.
Through the chair, in large part that will already be in the asset management plans, future growth that Sean's team have got planned. How we present that to you, we can take that away and have a think about that.
Right, Councillor Cooper.
The that 104 assessment, that's the infrastructure assessment, is that right?
Section 104 of the Act, it's the effects assessment.
So, for example, when the resource consent for a big one goes in, we discussed it around the Mansell block at length that there wasn't an assessment of the infrastructure around. They had a word for it. It was infrastructure.
Structure plan.
Structure plan. So do these big ones have to have a structure plan?
It depends on the type of application that it is. Yeah. So some of the ones that are on this list does have. I think the 109, 77 to 109 Capity Road is one of them that do require a structure plan.
Just it would be nice to have that, whether that applies on this graph, if that's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Just for us to understand that, there is actually, so when we're talking to the public, we can say, well, actually on this one here, there is actually going to be an infrastructure assessment. Just a question on the infrastructure assessment. Does it assess schools and medical? No, it's not. It's for Three Waters and... Okay.
Council staff.
Great. And just lastly, it's a comment and sort of follows on from what Darren was saying, that all this discourse is all very interesting, but we as council, in some ways, we're quite passive. We're the regulator. So someone applies, we make the settings, district plans, we're the resource consent facilitator. We don't actually input whether the school can take another development, whether the hospital should be built or whether so it's all very interesting, but sort of just talk, isn't it, really, to some degree, because we're the regulator. We don't get to say, you can't go there, we get to apply the rules. if we don't like the rules, then it's for the table to try and change the rules, and we did that earlier in the year with the signing off the intensification. So just a comment from me is one very interesting bit, sort of, you know, just a comment.
Councillor Wilson, have you got a real quick one?
Yep, and it's relevant.
Thank goodness.
Given revocation process that's underway, and a lot of what is currently state highway will become effectively local road, in terms of the zoning along that, at the moment there are lots of constraints in building, developing, etc., because it's on a state highway, but it will no longer be a state highway. So have we got a cunning plan for that? Have we worked that through, or is that something that we're going to be looking at? Because I mean, the rules around building a big housing development alongside a state highway are way different than building it alongside what would be determined to be a local road. So I'm just wondering where we're at with that, and presumably it would require a zone change.
I think for today I'd say to you, yes. When we come back to you and talk about zoning, I think we can unpack that with you. If you're asking the implications for resource consents at the moment, we might cover that today, if that's okay.
Yes, so even though the plans would not necessarily be updated, because there's a process that would have to apply through the district plan, we would consider that. So if there's proof that it has been revoked, then the normal rules of the zone would apply.
Sean wants to say something.
Sean wanted to say
Just
something.
very, very quickly, the designation of to the state highway and the contains the words just escape me in terms of the actual designation for the road. We're retaining that designation even though it's transferring over to council, so that we have then veto rights over access to it. So in terms of resource consent, planning and approval, all of that stuff would apply, but it has another level of protection that will be retained that allows us to have an input as to whether there can be connections applied to it. So there's two levels of protection.
I have a left field question, and I probably know the answer to it already, but have we ever considered in these big developments about, and I'm pretty sure we can't do this, but how we would go about ensuring that a percentage of the houses is for residents? I'm pretty 100% sure that we don't have a regulatory power to do that, but in avenues, have we ever thought about that?
I'm probably looking at Chris. Currently, nothing. It would be a negotiation with the developer through the process, and largely those negotiations would happen in Chris's ED team.
Yeah, we do negotiate, but I feel that your point about there being no legislative power to being able to tell somebody they have to do 50% locals, 50% new. We don't have the power to do that, but where we can line it up with the strategies we're putting in place, the growth strategy and other things, we do have those conversations and are trying to push forward for that.
Yeah, look, I'm just aware that we're expanding out into all sorts of territories here, but there's obviously a real issue here about how we deal with growth in Kapiti, and I don't think today's agenda item is the means by which we should be thrashing out those discussions. So I'm just wondering, look, if there's, and we are due for a morning tea break. Look, I'm happy to take more questions if there's something really pertinent and relevant to this update. What is an update on resource consents? Jocelyn, is yours a question that needs to be asked now, or can you take it offline, or?
It's a question that doesn't necessarily need to be answered now, but I think it's important. So obviously we've spent a lot of time having conversations about infrastructure, but we've also spent a lot of time about encouraging developers to provide low-cost housing. That hasn't, in these developments, that hasn't been mentioned today, and I'm interested to know whether or not that has been factored into, the work that these developers, I suppose, what these developers are actually planning in some of those areas.
No, I was briefly going to say, I'm going to do a bit of a pitch. We had an earlier item on the work program for our subcommittees and this committee, and there will also be a council work program. If there's things that you're interested in us coming back and briefing you on, you can certainly put those ideas into that process and we can see how we bring that back. In terms of that point, I can assure you that as part of our housing strategy and the implementation of it, we're very much focused on affordable housing. We are updating you on aspects of that, and if there's parts of that that you want a focus on this year, let us know, and we can prioritise that conversation with you, but wouldn't step into that today. And I think I heard Jocelyn say she wasn't expecting that, but that might be the way that I cover the response. It will come back to you.
All right, thank you.
So thank you for that, Chris. I suppose the thing that I want to raise is that potentially there are 3,000 dwellings here, and
Jocelyn,
that some of that opportunity might be missed out on.
Yeah, Jocelyn, look, we need to cut this off.
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
think
I'm done.
Just if you've got
Thank you.
items for the agenda for the work program, please send them through to Chris, and we'll
Yeah.
deal with those at another meeting. So, thank you everybody for that discussion. I'd just like to move now that the Strategy, Operations and Finance Committee notes this update. If you have a seconder for that, Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll take 10 minutes now for a short break and then come back and talk about our direction of travel for health.